Welcome, guys, to the Gun Guys episode. I'm Bill Wilson, Wilson Combat. I'm here with my good buddy, Ken Hackathorn. Today, we're going to talk about the future. Ken, I've known you for 40 years now. This year makes 40 years. Can you believe that?
It doesn't seem that long, but when I look in the mirror, I can believe it.
Yeah. Over those 40 years, you have had an uncanny ability to predict the future of the firearms industry. You know, firearms trends and what products would be successful and what products wouldn't. To my memory, I think the only one you've been wrong on was the Glock.
And the 40 cal.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think that it would ever catch, but a lot of it, Bill, is for whatever reason, sometimes I tell people I'm not very smart. I mean, I recognize I'm not very smart.
I don't necessarily agree with that,
but I'm in the sense, but I've been fairly good at kind of seeing where things are going, or I can kind of pick up on the fact that part of being a part of the gun culture, I'm very in tune with that, and I'm sometimes amazed at things that people don't pick up. Like this, take for example, right now, there's this huge conflict in our society about the Second Amendment based upon some of the tragic events of the past. And you got people on the left that are arguing an emotional argument, and you got people on the right arguing a logical argument. And we both know they're never going to agree because emotional people are not going to change their emotions because logic's not involved. Sometimes people overlook the reality of what this is really about. And that reality is in the last election, the Democrats lost for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons was the gun culture, the gun vote, call it what you want, which the left believes is run by the NRA, was a factor in why their candidate lost the election. She could talk gun control in New England, she could talk gun control on the West Coast, and that might have sold. But everything in between, except for a few places, people didn't like it. And whether they like to hear it or not, the Electoral College decides who's going to be the president of the United States. Democrats have been in denial about that. But I guarantee they've also looked at the facts. And one of the factors is that her position on gun control was one of the factors that cost her election. NRA's got 5 million members. There's probably another 50 million people that pay attention because they're gun enthusiasts or gun owners that follow the NRA lead. So the Democrats have recognized the NRA is one of the reasons they lost the election. And all this media attack and propaganda to destroy the NRA and discredit it and try to make it look bad and call it a terrorist organization is the political reality that they see the NRA and gun owners, but NRA in particular, as a threat to them in the future. So they're doing everything they can. Propaganda is about discrediting, destroying, causing people to move away from a particular program or move towards it. Mm-hmm. They're doing they can destroy the NRA. Cold hard reality is if the NRA backed the Democrats, there wouldn't be any of this discussion about Second Amendment rights. I mean, let's face it. Hell, we could be asking for reciprocity and carrying backpack nukes, and they'd be all behind it. They'd be for it. So that's pretty obvious, and people need to wake up and realize that by destroying the NRA, they want to destroy a voting bloc that they think was part of the reason they lost the election. And in the firearms trade, we see some other things. I mean, I've always been, I've been a consultant for a lot of companies. I tell people, I've been giving you ideas for 30 some years. Finally, I'm working for you as a consultant and you're paying me a little bit for it. So and the good news is I get a couple guns a year. That's what it's really about. But the bottom line is that I've been a consultant for a lot of different gun companies. And one of the things that always amazed me, Bill, is they bring you in, they listen to what you have to say, they pay you well, and ignore everything you tell them. And one of the trends I can tell you that has always amazed me about the American gun companies is that they're typically run by people that don't know anything about guns. Mm-hmm. And when you see that, you go, when you ask the guy, you're taking a break or chatting casually, and you say, well, what kind of gun do you have for self-defense? And the guy says, I don't own a gun.
But he's an executive.
I got a 5-iron.
But he's an executive at a gun company.
Yeah, and you go, whoa, that's a bad sign. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that across the board. And businesses have bought the American firearms industry, the big ones, to make money. And don't get us wrong, we understand it's about making money. If you're not making money, you're not going to be around this business for long. But they generally don't understand the market. And if you can understand what the gun market is about, the gun culture, which is what we're talking about.
It actually is a culture.
It is a culture. If you understand what they want and what it's about, you can make pretty good predictions about the future. So I don't think it's a particularly an art. It's just reading the tea leaves and saying, for example, the trend in America. I remember you were the guy. I remember when we started IDPA, and that was in 96, 97. You were the guy that said that CCW, concealed carry permit systems, were going to be the future in America, and it was going to explode. I'll be honest with you, Bill. Obviously, they're going like, nah, I don't think so. You were right on that one. And look how it's changed the gun culture and the gun market. People that weren't making concealment handguns, if they didn't make it switch pretty quick, let's face it, they were lost. And by the way, they've all jumped on it. I remember telling you many years ago when your business, you were very popular in the competition arena. You were building USPSA type race guns, comp guns, and let's face it, the Rob Latham LE comp was one of the trend gun in the entire gun business. But I remember we talked about it, and really kind of preceded you wanting to start IDPA. Is that, I remember saying, Bill, the name is Wilson Combat, not Wilson Competition. The future is in building what we'll call self-defense guns. So you kind of read those tea leaves and say, I can tell where it's going. Popular trends in America today, we saw it, is this precision shooting thing, or long-range rifle stuff, has exploded on the American scene. And we're seeing trend, and you see it in your rifle business, of people saying, hey, I want a rifle I can go out and compete with in these long-range rifle matches. So the companies that are slow to respond are the ones that are going to always be chasing their tail. So, yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. And people ask me all the time, what do you think is going to happen? And I go, well, for example, I'm a firm believer that probably the future is red dot sighted pistols. Somewhere in the next decade or so, we're going to see that pretty much become reality. We're not there now.
No, that cake's not fully baked yet.
No. And I tell people, look, any product, whatever it is, if you take a product and say, okay, what are the pluses? What are the minuses? If 50%, if you have 5 pluses and 5 minuses, the answer is no. It's not a good product. And if you look at red dot sights and handguns, right now you pretty much got like one valid plus, and that is it makes it easier to shoot at long distance. You might add to the people with deteriorating vision, allows them to stay in the shooting arena. But that's the only pluses. And then when you list everything else, the negatives overwhelm it so far. It's not. Anybody that carries a gun with a red dot sight on it and tells me they are seriously carrying for self-defense, man, I'm going to question their logic. Now, having said that, when some big manufacturer, I don't care whether it's Glock, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, when somebody sits down to the red dot vendors and says, I want to build an integral slide red dot sight. I want that red dot sight to have a battery life of 3 years. I want it to be able to resist, as far as shock, for 3,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 cycles without failure. And if you make me this product that I can put into a slide of my gun with an integral system that will do what I want, I'll buy 100,000 of them over, say, the next 10 years. Then those red dot sight makers will go out and say, okay, here's what we got to do. We're going to make that product. And when that happens, then this thing will finally take off. And it'll quickly reach a point where if you're marketing a service pistol or self-defense pistol, without it, you're not going to be in the horse race. But we're not there. And I'm amazed the amount of people who want to kid themselves and think we are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of them, the durability suspect, the battery life's terrible. I mean, they got, as our friend Vickers always says, got a lot of fleas yet,
Well, I was at the NRA show with you, and I spoke briefly with Phil Strader, and he was at the Sig Sauer booth with the new M17 pistol. And one of the requirements for that is, it's got a rear sight assembly you can take off with the plan that the future is you can put a red dot on it. And the Army people specified they wanted that sight if you will, that interface to be match up for the Leopold Delta Point. Which certainly wouldn't be my first pick. But what they did by making that move is for example, they pretty much assured that in the future, whoever comes up with the red dot sight that meets the military spec, you darn well are going to have to match the Delta Point footprint.
Well, it's kind of like the military adopting M-LOK versus key mod. Versus key mod. I mean, so M-LOK's going to, by default, be the industry standard.
Exactly. And so you look at a lot of that. People ask me, so what do you think the future is in handguns? Well, I think it's striker-fired polymer frame guns. May not be exactly what you and I would pick first, but that's the world.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody came to me and you said, Ken, if you were to ask me tomorrow, hey, Ken, what do you think about me making a double action service pistol? I'd go, Bill, that's not a smart move, because as much as you and I have spent trigger time with double action autos, and we're not at least been intimidated with them, saleability, it's history. The single action 1911, wonderful gun. It'll always be a popular seller, but we understand that its popularity as these, shall we say, the millennial market becomes more and more part of the purchasing market, that the demand for the 1911, it's not going to drop, but it's going to taper off. So that's kind of the way it is. I see some concerns with striker-fired pistols, not the least of which is safety, because let's face it, lots of people, if they mishandle these guns or reholster them improperly, they get a loud noise when they don't want it. And so I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed down the road. I think you're going to see, and we agree that, I remember when the Beretta M9 was adopted, most of us were kind of like, oh, this is terrible. John Browning's gun's going to be put out to pasture. But you were like me. We got Berettas, so we better learn how to use one. And we discovered, you know what? It's a pretty good gun. And I think right now there's a lot of people that are real unhappy about the choice of the SIG 320. You know, people often say to me, well, how come the SIG 321 and the Glock didn't? And the answer is it was about money. It was basically, they were down to the point where they had two pistols that met all the requirements. And it was like, well, why do we go on testing these things side by side? Why don't I just get the best deal and run with it? And they did. And make no mistake, all small arms, just like cars and motorcycles, the designs have to mature. And they're going to start off with problems, and then they've got to fix them as they go. The U.S. Army is going to make SIG step up to the plate and fix the issues. And there's still other ones to be solved. We all know that. But they'll get it fixed. And SIG Sauer will, my guess is in a couple of years, when you go out and buy a 320, you're going to have a really good pistol based on the fact that they've made the improvements necessary. You know, they took a real hit last year about safety, drop safety. But what did they do? They went and dressed it and did their best to fix it. So I think the 320, one of the things you're thinking about is right now we're going to get into the 320 customization, and you're looking at all kinds of ways to address some of the issues in the product line. Smart move. I think caliber wise, I'm going to guess the 9mm is around the future. Kind of interesting because it's actually technically been around longer than the 45.
Yeah,
1908 versus 1911. I would say that if we're fortunate, we don't have any political turmoil. I think there's a good chance ammunition prices will remain fairly favorable to the end user. Caliber wise, I mean, one thing you and I both see is every year all these companies are introducing new rounds, new rifle cartridges, new whatever. And the reality is we know that about maybe 25% will stick. The rest of them will kind of disappear.
You know, some of them are just like designer cartridges, and some of them actually fit a niche.
Have a need.
You know, there's actually a need for some of them. And
I tell people, look at the 10mm. We'd almost written it off, and right now we're seeing a resurgence in the 10mm. And I think that'll probably continue for a while. The big if is, if something were to happen where, for whatever reasons, legislative, we would see a magazine capacity ban, say like Clinton did with the 10-round thing, you're now may see a change of course where suddenly the 1911 takes on importance, and you're going to see the high cap guns kind of drop in importance. So those are the wild cards we can't predict.
But that's what happened in the past, so we can only assume that's what's going to happen in the future should that happen.
I think I tell you most people don't grasp this. Without a doubt, the hottest thing in the gun culture today are the 80% receiver. I mean, you got people that weren't even interested in guns. You got all these millennials. They have, by the way, the millennials have no brand loyalty, anything. It's all about this. But buying 80% AR receivers or 80% Glock receivers and building guns out of parts, that they are I mean, that's the craze. And it's funny because some of those people, you could lay an 80% receiver and a bunch of parts for an AR on the table, and you could do the same thing with a brand new Colt 6920, and they'll pick the 80% gun to build. You and I would kind of look askance about it, but that's the way it is, and that has a lot to do with where the future is going to be. Product wise, and you're a pretty smart guy, Bill. You realize that you need to look at a product line and be diversified enough that for the people who have no brand loyalty, which represents the new market, you need to have products that are priced competitively that they're going to look at and say, that's the price of what I want to pay. Therefore, I'm going to purchase that. So almost all companies, you better have a premium line for people who want the premium stuff, and another what we'll call a price competitive line where that group of people in the marketplace will go to the product because the price is right. So I think that's a lot of it. We're heading to where we need to be as far as some stability in pricing. Let's face it, you can buy guns now at a actually pretty fair price. I mean, it's pretty hard to beat.
Somewhere of a buyer's market.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, thanks for your forecast.
Hey, we'll see what happens.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Be sure and sign up for our YouTube channel and subscribe. And we'll be back with more Gun Guys in the future.